Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and to Urban Legends that come under the category of mystery. This is called The Last Voyage of the Lyubov Orlova. The Lyubov Orlova, a 300-foot long cruise ship strengthened to withstand ice floating in the Southern Ocean, was launched in Yugoslavia in 1976. She served as a cruise ship until she ran aground on Deception Island, Antarctica, in 2006. The ship suffered a number of problems and ended up abandoned in Newfoundland after financial wrangling, destined for the scrap heap. She was to be towed by a tug to the Dominican Republic, where she could be dismantled, but soon after starting the voyage, the tow line to the tugboat broke, and despite all their efforts, the crew could not regain control of the 4,250-ton vessel due to deteriorating weather conditions. The Orlova was free and started on a lonely journey east across the Atlantic. The ship turned up in various parts of the ocean, but due to her size and the fact she was in international waters, nobody wanted to take responsibility. When she turned up off the coast of Ireland several months later, having drifted thousands of miles, it was declared that she might be a danger to shipping, and a warning was issued. Even more terrifying was the fact that she might be infested with thousands of diseased rats who survived by eating seabirds and each other. She flashed upon radar, but search planes failed to catch any sight of her. While salvage hunters scoured the waters in hopes of a payday, newspapers warned that she could make landfall at any time with her grisly cargo. The last report suggested that the ship had missed Ireland but was headed towards the English coast. It was believed that if she ran aground close to shore, thousands of hungry rats would jump ship to find food on land. If the Coast Guard, or salvage hunters, found her first, they would have to board her and brave whatever they found below decks. Luckily, or perhaps not, neither the ghost ship nor the cannibal rodents on board have ever been detected since. The next is mysterious shoes. A holidaymaker was walking along the beach on a picturesque island in British Columbia, Canada, when she caught sight of a sports shoe on the sand. There was nobody else around, so she assumed that it must have been washed up by the waves. Upon closer inspection, to her horror, she realized that the shoe contained a human foot in an advanced state of decomposition. The sight has become a familiar one for beachcombers since 2007, as 16 grisly items of footwear, most of them containing a right foot, have appeared on the shores of Canada and Washington, with the most recent turning up in February 2006. Where had they come from, and to whom did they belong? Macabre theories emerged. Some believed the feet had drifted across the Pacific Ocean for years and belonged to the victims of the 2004 tsunami, while others thought that the shoe owners were casualties from plane crashes. Another hypothesis was that removing people's feet could have been a local serial killer's or crime syndicate's favourite way of disposing of the victims. Painstaking forensic research identified the former owners of 5 of the different feet. Most of them were thought to be suicidal people who had jumped from bridges in the area and had been in the water for some time. But why did people keep finding only their shoes? And why did this happen only in a particular part of the world? The authorities concluded that most of the feet were not deliberately severed, but disarticulated after decomposing in the water. And that the kind of shoes people were finding, like trainers and hiking boots, are the sort of items that will eventually wash ashore. The next story is Hinterkaifeck. For several weeks, a farmer had been noticing strange goings-on at his property, Hinterkaifeck, where he lived with his wife, daughter and 2 grandchildren. It was 1922, and the farmer's son-in-law was missing, presumed dead, after serving in World War I. Their maid had recently quit, claiming that the barns were haunted, and that she was too scared to go inside. Early one morning, the farmer had seen a mysterious set of footprints in the snow. They led from the forest to a barn and seemed to end there. So he searched the place carefully, thinking that a tramp may have been looking to escape the cold, but found nobody. Other things had been happening. The farmer found a mysterious newspaper from another town on his land, while his daughter reported hearing footsteps in the attic of the farmhouse, where he rarely went, but he dismissed the strange noises as nothing to worry about. Also, a set of keys from the farm had gone missing, and although the farmer maid was a suspect, nothing had come of it. He did not report anything to the authorities. After all, what could they do? But he had mentioned the odd events to neighbours. A new maid arrived one Friday at the end of March of that year. A few hours later, everybody at the farm was dead. All 6 people, including the children, had been murdered with a mattock, a heavy tool similar to a pickaxe. The bodies weren't discovered for weeks until a neighbour came to check on the farm after the mail wasn't picked up and the granddaughter missed school. An investigation of the grisly crime scene led police to believe that the farmer, his wife, the daughter, and his granddaughter had been lured out to the barn and murdered one by one. The new maid and the young boy were killed as they slept in the farmhouse. The farmer's granddaughter had been left to die in the barn next to the body of her mother. It was said that she tore her own hair out in distress. The police suspected a robbery at first, but there was plenty of money still in the house. Bizarrely, despite the farm being unmanned for several days, the animals had been kept fed and watered, and neighbours saw smoke coming from the house over the weekend. More than 100 suspects were questioned over the years, but none were ever charged with the crimes, and the farm was demolished the following year. Rumours began spreading amongst locals that the son-in-law may have had something to do with it. His body had never been recovered from the battlefield, so perhaps he wasn't dead after all. The next mysterious story is The Polar Bears Made Me Do It. A university outside London is housed in a grand old building, renowned for its extensive haunt collection. At the end of every academic year, students take their final exams in a great hall, whose walls are covered with fine paintings. Most students keep their eyes on their exam papers, but some find that the ancient figures watching from inside the picture frames are affecting their performance, and there is one particular image with a terrifying reputation. It's said that if you look at the painting for too long while you sit an exam, bad things will happen. It goes without saying that you will fail the paper, but if the campus legend is true, you could also suffer a far worse fate. One of the most prized artworks in the university collection is Man Proposes, God Disposes, a painting by a famous 19th century artist that depicts the end of a cursed expedition to the Arctic led by an aristocratic English explorer. His ships became stuck in ice and he disappeared with his crew. When rescuers attempted to track them down, they discovered only their frozen bones. The explorers had been reduced to cannibalism in a desperate bid to survive. The painting features 2 monstrous polar bears tearing at the wreckage of the ship, and one has its claws in the stripped rib cage of a man. Many years ago, a student was struggling with an English literature exam and scanning the pictures on the walls for inspiration. One of the paintings caught his attention, and he began staring at it, mumbling incoherently. Then, to the horror of the others present, he grabbed a sharpened pencil and shoved it right through his eye into his brain, instantly killing himself. Had something about the painting driven him mad? When shocked tutors read through his exam paper trying to make sense of his inexplicable actions, they saw that he had scrawled "The Bears" all over it. The student's death caused a sensation, and rumours about the painting quickly spread across campus. Soon the fear was so intense that no student would enter the hall during exam season, never mind sit within sight of the polar bears. The college authorities eventually caved to the hysteria and agreed to cover the picture frame with a flag. Despite his renowned talent, the artist who originally painted the powerful picture was known to have struggled with alcoholism, drug use, and depression, suffering a mental breakdown in his 30s. He was eventually declared insane and committed to a mental asylum, where he died within a year. As for the polar bears, well, they are still hidden from view when exam season comes around. The next is the cursed amethyst. Most objects are donated to museums because their owners think they would be better there and other people should see them. Some items, however, are there because the owners want rid of them. As they are cursed, they should not be in any one person's possession. The Natural History Museum in London has thousands of objects in its collection, all with an interesting story. There is a magnificent display of gemstones housed in a high security cabinet known as the Vault. If you look carefully in one corner, you will see a purple amethyst stone decorated with ancient Persian symbols. Although it looks pretty, but unremarkable, it is anything but. Its owner once described the amethyst as trebly accursed and stained with blood, and the dishonour of everyone who has ever owned it. The gemstone first came to the museum in the 1940s, donated by the owner's daughter, along with a letter from her father, Edward Heron Allen, dated 1904, and addressed to whomever shall be the future possessor. The letter explains that the amethyst was stolen from an ancient Indian temple in the 19th century, brought to England by an officer in Bengal cavalry, who, after taking possession of the stone, lost both health and money. The officer who looted the jewel passed it to his son, and he gave it to a friend, who then committed suicide and bequeathed the stone back to him in his will. In 1890, he gave the stone to Heron Allen, a noted London lawyer, naturalist, Persian scholar and spiritualist. He, too, was troubled by various misfortunes until he bound the stone with a metal double-headed snake symbol, with which he claimed to have temporarily calmed the curse. Heron Allen kept the amethyst in his library, where both he and his friends saw the ghost of a Hindu holy man thought to be looking for the stone. He lent the jewel to a friend who was overwhelmed with every possible disaster and so gave it back to him. After more problems, Heron Allen threw the valuable gem in a canal, hoping to have seen the last of it. But it was dredged up and again returned to its reluctant owner by a knowledgeable dealer. So he gave it another friend, a singer, who subsequently lost her voice and her whole career. When Heron Allen had a child, he decided to hide the jewel away for good. In 1904, he hid the amethyst inside 7 boxes strewn with protective charms and secured it in a bank vault, with the instructions that it should not be removed for 33 years after his death. He included a letter with the jewel, warning any future owners of its powers, with the advice to him or her to cast it into the sea. Mysteriously, he claimed that he was forbidden to do so himself by an oath to a murky secret society. Edward Heron Allen died in 1944, and possession of the stone passed to his daughter, who waited less than a year before donating it to the Natural History Museum. The gem lay there largely unnoted for decades. It was not a permanent display, and the tale of the curse was not publicised. In 2007, though, the jewel was rediscovered and put on public display, along with its incredible story. Soon there were rumblings that the stone had not lost its power. You might think that the highly educated, rational types working in London Museum in the 21st century would regard the idea of a cursed gemstone as something out of Indiana Jones films. But the warnings from history continued to echo. The curator responsible for the amethyst display claimed that when he removed it from its case and took it to a meeting of the Heron Allen Society, he encountered a frightening lightning storm on the way there and nearly didn't make it. And that was not all. Every time he had removed the stone from the museum, he has been struck down with a mysterious illness, as if the jewel was still intent on bringing misfortune to all who possessed it. The next story is the Number Station's Mystery. Next time you're tuning a radio, keep an ear out for strange voices in the statics between the pop music stations. It might be a pirate radio broadcast, or perhaps something rather more sinister. mystery transmissions that have been broadcast intermittently since the start of the Cold War, and nobody knows where they came from, who is sending them, and what they mean. Many can be heard on particular shortwave frequencies as a series of buzzes and beeps, possibly Morse code or some other encrypted secret communication. Some number stations, as they have become known, feature robotic voices reading out seemingly random sequences of words or numbers such as Yankee, Oscar, Foxtrot, for 24 hours a day. Some suspect the broadcast to be messages to undercover agents or sleeper cells waiting for calls to action in foreign countries. Many recognised broadcasts from the number stations have dropped off the radar after the fall of the Soviet Union, but others remain that whether anybody is still taking any notice is a real mystery, as it's possible to track the origin of the messages, but much harder to determine who is listening to them. The Lincolnshire Poacher broadcast featured a man with an English accent reading groups of numbers separated by the electronic tune of Old English folk song, The Lincolnshire Poacher. The transmission was heard for decades, suddenly disappearing in 2008. Amateurs are thought to have located the source of the transmission in Cyprus, where the British Air Force has had a presence for many years. Several people were once charged by United States authorities with the accusation of spying for Cuba. They had allegedly received and decoded secret messages sent via shortwave radio from the communist island. Despite this, no government has ever admitted the existence of the number stations. When a radio listener in Europe complained to the BBC that a woman reading out random numbers had interrupted the World Service news, the broadcaster claimed that it was simply a weather forecast for ski resorts. Some have heard regular number stations being corrupted or jammed. For example, an English language number station was suddenly interrupted by Chinese music. Nobody knows whether this was a genuine signal for any spies listening, meddling by a foreign power, or simply a case of crossed wires. The next is called the bloop. Please excuse Storm snoring in the background. She's fast asleep and she has a little nose, but she makes a big noise. Anyway, the bloop. In the late 1990s, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, detected something unusual on their earthquake monitoring equipment. It was an extremely powerful low-frequency sound rumbling through the ocean, lasting for several minutes. It seemed to emanate from the middle of the South Pacific, 300 miles from land. The sound, which scientists dubbed the bloop, and I'm sure most of you have heard of this, was also picked up by the US Navy hydrophone array, usually relied upon to detect Russian nuclear submarines. The noise registered on their system several times and then disappeared. Nuclear submarines, earthquakes, or explosives were ruled out as likely causes. When icebergs calve from the ice shelf into the sea, scraping the sea floor, they can cause incredibly loud and long-lasting noises that echo through the ocean. But Antarctic scientists have not recorded any such events. The NOAA have also detected other similar sounds occurring at different locations. For a while, the prime suspect was a whale, as the sound profile matched that created by a living creature. But the bloop was many times louder than even a blue whale, the loudest known creature in the ocean. Is the bloop the call of an undiscovered monster in the unexplored depths of the deepest ocean on the earth? And the bloop is pretty well known. There's lots of stuff you can research regarding that, like on YouTube and Google, and it'll come up and tell you lots of different things. And our last mystery, the Money Pit. There are many islands off the coast of Nova Scotia, Venezuela, but one in particular has attracted a lot of attention over the years. Do you know what this island is, guys? If you watch Golden Tears, things like that, you'll recognise this island for sure. Oak Island is around 140 acres in size and is accessible from shore along a narrow raised causeway built in the 20th century. In the late 18th century, 3 young men were exploring the area and decided to investigate the island after seeing lights from the shore. They rowed across the narrow channel from the mainland and started to survey their surroundings. They soon came upon a depression in the land in a clearing amongst the oak trees that covered much of the island. They saw that a rotten and crude pulley system had been constructed over the dip, using an oak tree, and they wondered why. They had all heard the stories about treasure hidden in the area and knew that Nova Scotia, being relatively untouched by Europeans, was a popular haunt of pirates hiding from the British Navy. There was a legendary pilot called William Kidd, who was hanged by the British in 1701. It was known that before his capture he had buried part of his treasure on the island in the area to use as a bargaining tool. The value of the hoard and its whereabouts remained undiscovered after his death, fueling treasure hunts on several islands. Maybe the boys had chanced upon Kidd's hiding place? They started to dig and soon hit something hard a few feet below the ground, which turned out to be a layer of rocks. There was nothing underneath, but hoping that something interesting might be buried there, they continued digging and found a layer of logs, 10 feet below, and then another. They had excavated a pit dug in the clay soil, with marks made by pickaxes on the walls. It was clearly man-made, but who had dug it, and why? They managed to dig to a depth of 30 feet, where they found another floor of planks. Before they had to abandon their search. They hadn't found anything valuable, but they were convinced that something was down there, and others soon caught scent of the treasure hunt. It became known as the Oak Island Money Pit, although no money has been found. Other treasure seekers, more professional than the boys who had discovered the hole, soon tried their luck. Almost 10 years after the original discovery, a company was formed to make a serious excavation of the island. They assembled a workforce and dug far deeper than the boys had managed. They discovered the same marker logs at 10-foot intervals, layers of coconut fibres, a material often used aboard ships to harness cargo, some kind of putty, possibly used to seal the layers. At the deepest point of the dig, they found something remarkable. A flat stone, similar to flagstones that are capped the money pit, but inscribed with symbols. However, the markings made no sense to anyone in the group, so they recruited linguists to decipher the mysterious ruins. Various experts disputed the meaning, but one believed a rough translation to be 40 feet below, 5 million is buried. They continued to dig, reaching a depth of almost 100 feet before water started to fill the pit. They claimed to have struck something solid at the bottom before rising waters forced them to vacate the hole. The next morning, there was too much water to consider going back down, so the mystery of the island had remained buried for at least another season. The company returned to the site and dug a new shaft through the clay, under the spot they had reached the last time. They planned to tunnel up into the pit and recover whatever it was their shovels had struck on the previous dig. All went well at first, but then the cursed hole filled with water and no amount of pumping could clear the tunnel. They had failed. The obvious question was, if they were finding it so hard to even uncover the treasure, how did the original workers manage to bury it and keep it a secret? Nobody made an attempt on the money pit for several decades, but the legend lives on. And digging resumed in the middle of the 19th century. Different missions dug several shafts into the pit, but all encountered the same problem. They would find intriguing signs, proving that someone had been there before them, but the threat of flooding was ever present. It was too dangerous to deploy men underground, so one firm resorted to using a drill that would drive the surface, whatever it encountered underground. It turned up tantalizing clues, fragments of metal which some supposed were part of treasure chests. They then felt the drill break through into an air pocket, and they knew that whatever they had found had fallen down into a cavern whose size was impossible to know. Was this a booby trap designed? Would this deter even the most determined treasure hunters? They would not be deterred, though, and poured more money into finding the secrets of the island, even building a dam in the bay to prevent the tide from filling up the hole as it ebbed and flowed. Eventually, this attempt also failed, and the money ran out again. Yet more organisations put up funds for Oak Island hunts, and a drilling operation found another small but intriguing clue. a piece of parchment that was claimed to have been Roman numerals written on it. They also maintained to have brought up part of a gold chain, but this has never been verified. All physical clues of this nature have long since been lost. One expedition even used dynamite to create a crater over the pit, but to no avail. In the early 20th century, another well-funded operation set foot on the island. One of the investigators was the explorer and future United States President, Franklin Roosevelt, who maintained an interest in the mystery for many years. In the 1930s, a businessman bought the part of the island that contained the money pit and excavated to a depth of 160 feet, where he found pickaxes identified as British in origin. It was impossible to know whether these were a clue as to whereabouts of loot had been left or thereby previous treasure hunters who had failed. Money, pride, and reputations were not the only things lost to the pit. In 1861, a man was scalded to death when a steam boiler exploded, and in 1897, a worker was fatally injured after falling into the hole. They would not be the last to perish on Oak Island. In the 1960s, when the money pit treasure was rumoured to be worth more than 30 million, a family looking for a venture struck a deal to start another dig and moved to the island. There they lived for years in tough, primitive conditions, with their faith in the existence of treasure as the only thing keeping them going. The attempt ended in tragedy when a 30-foot shaft they dug became filled with toxic fumes, which overcame the father of the family. His son attempted to rescue him, but he too succumbed, as did two other workers. Even this did not stop the hunters from coming, though. In 1965, a causeway was built to link the island to the shore, allowing a large crane to dig out a huge amount of earth around the pit. Nothing of any importance was turned up. In the 1970s, an industrial operation plunged steel watertight chambers into the pit and lowered cameras into the darkness. Sensationally, the footage claimed to reveal evidence of wooden chests and human remains. But then again, this was never actually confirmed. The island is still a site of great interest to treasure hunters, and investors in various digs have ranged from actors John Wayne, Errol Flynn, to the aristocrat William Astor, and even the polar explorer Richard Bride. However, nobody has ever found any treasure on the island. Rumours about the treasure and the purpose of the pit have varied wildly. Some think that it's not the hoardings of a pirate, but the lost jewels of the Marie Antoinette, hidden after the French Revolution, or documents proving that William Shakespeare did not write his plays. Others believe that it's a Holy Grail, planted there by the Knights Templar, a buried Viking ship, or an elaborate conspiracy concocted by Freemasons. The mystery of the island will probably never be discovered, but the hunt is still on. And you'll know the hunt is still on if you have watched The Curse of Oak Island. Very good programme. You can probably stream it and look for it still now. The Curse of Oak Island, because that's the more up-to-date research of the area and attempted excavation and such. And they did find some interesting things. Did they find anything like gold in chests? No, they didn't. But it's still an interesting watch if you're interested in that sort of thing. Anyway, those are the last of the urban legends that come under mystery. Please hit the like, share if you can, and if you're not yet subscribed, please consider doing so. Many blessings.